How are you?
Hi, I'm super good, and you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. If you can just give a little bit of background about yourself and why you started photography.
Yeah, sure. So I am currently based in the Canadian Rockies in Canmore,
Okay.
and I'm from Quebec. And I basically started photography back in end of 2015, beginning of 2016. Um, and the way that I started photography is a little bit funny because it has nothing to do with landscape photography.
Right.
So basically, back in 2014, I took a trip to Australia
Okay.
where I worked in different farms. So I did some work at banana farms, cherry farms, and I did that for about 2 years. And then I was just kind of like documenting my side trips, like, going to waterfalls,
Yeah.
going to the beach with my phone. And I think at that time I had like an iPhone 3. So, just like didn't have any
Oh,
cameras. So this is all I could use. So I was just kind of like taking photos, posting on Instagram. And eventually there's one brand, Australian brand, who contacted me and they were like, hey, we've been seeing your work on your Instagram page. I would love for you to shoot our products. But at the time I didn't have any camera and I was like, my work? Like my work? What is this? Um, but even if I had no like prior expertise or experience in photography, I decided to say yes.
yeah.
And they had like a small budget, like 1,000 or 1,500. So I took the money to buy a camera,
Yeah.
and then I started to take photos of their products. And they were kind of like bandanas, so like,
Yeah.
just like you put on your head or like on your face.
Yeah.
And I started by taking photos of people doing outdoors activities, so like running, kayaking, hiking, wearing the product. So just like shooting automatic on my little Sony A6000, and I think I had a 35 mil f 1.4 if I remember. So that was kind of like my first gear, and that's how I started.
Yeah.
And then I slowly realized that I really enjoyed shooting nature. So at the end of my 2 years of farming, I decided to take a solo trip a little bit everywhere. So I stopped
Okay.
in Indonesia, Hawaii, and then I ended up in the Canadian Rockies. So then I still shooting automatic, trying to figure out my manual modes. But the real kind of like the real moment where I really kind of like started to enjoy more landscape photography was when I arrived in the Canadian Rockies with like the huge
Yeah.
mountains, the blue glacier lakes. Like I've never seen stuff like that before, and I was just really captivated by that type of photography. So that's how I started to do landscape photography. So it went from like random banana farming, taking photos in Australia, to taking photos of mountains in the Canadian Rockies. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like the backstory.
Yeah. No, that's obviously I kind of knew a little bit. But it's always nice to hear it from yourself. And I take it, was it mainly obviously like you said traveling, but did you go like mainly for traveling the next, like you obviously mentioned the next time, but was that mainly for traveling and you took your camera with you, or were you thinking, right, I want to go to these places, get photographs, or was it just to see the countries?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a photography purpose. Like I remember back end of 2015, beginning of 16, right before I took my trip, I was already kind of looking at Instagram and what other photographers were doing, and I was like, wow, it would be so amazing to find a way to like take photos for a living and travel for a living. So I did have this in the back of my mind, and I just decided to take a chance and really select these countries, so Indonesia, Hawaii, and the Canadian Rockies specifically, to experiment with photography. So
Yeah,
I think this definitely was like a motor to exploration and traveling.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Do you have any good or bad stories about traveling that you wish to share?
Yeah, I have a lot specifically related to photography,
Nah,
or
just feel free. Ones that stand out.
yeah. Yeah. So I think this one was back in 2017. So basically after I went to the Canadian Rockies, I took another trip, 6 months in New Zealand, and then I worked as a housekeeper in Mount Cook National Park. So that was pretty fun. But before that, my ex-boyfriend at the time and we bought a van to travel around New Zealand. And he was big on fly fishing, and he really wanted to go on like really remote specific places. And I remember there's one time we kind of had to break in onto a private property and then to take a side road, and then we had to go down in a real very very steep kind of road right next to a cliff to access the river. So like just the regular van, like not 4-wheel drive, went down there, and then we parked the van, and we just left the van, went fishing, came back, and we realized that we left the lights open. So we were on the private property about 15K deep into a raven, and then we didn't know what to do. No phone signal, so we had to hike back all the way to the main road, 15K, with like our most valuables, because we were like, well, what if we leave all our cameras and all our computers there? So we just decided to hike with all her most valuable stuff back to the road, 15K up, about maybe like 1,000 meters of elevation gain. Took us probably 5 hours to get back there. Yeah, it was horrible. And then we reached we did some hitchhiking to a gas station which had a battery pack, a battery booster. So we bought some, I don't know, $300, hiked back the 15K with everything. And then we try to start the van, but the thing is that it was an old van. The battery was completely drained, and we only had maybe like 1 or 2 kind of tries with that kind of battery that they had. So it was not the best one. So we tried to start, and it did not work. So this was absolutely just like, nerve-wracking, because we're like, well, what happens if, second time doesn't work? So we decided to push the van, break another fence, and then push the van down that another like really little road, and try to start the van as it's going down, because that's like another trick to start a car. So we did that. We broke the fence, went down, van did not start, and then we had one last try. And once again, down like super fast, try to start, and then it started. But it started, reached the bottom of the road. We heard like it kind of like dying down. So then get the booster, use all the rest, and then it was running. So we were fine. But the thing is that we needed to go back up. So go back up, not 4-wheel drive. We basically just had to dig some sort of like space, like without the rocks, where the wheels could like have enough grip. So we just ended up digging a way all the way up, which took us the entire night. And then finally we were able to go up. And so this was just like horror story with a van stuck on the private property. Don't do it. But, after that, we were just relieved. And then we got ourselves a nice hotel, and we just, we're like, well, maybe this was the last time that we do that. But it was definitely an adventure. So, that was kind of
at least you weren't on your own.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I don't know what I would have done on my own. That's definitely one of the moments where it's nice to be with someone else. But I think it was like really stressful moments.
What about sort of photography wise? Is there a moment that sticks out in your sort of mind from traveling?
Yeah, photography wise, I mean, I've been to a lot of spots where it's like a few days of hiking, and then you reach the viewpoint and then you can't see anything. But I think that that's just kind of like part of the, photography adventure. But there's one moment where I was in Patagonia back in 2019, right before I gave my first workshop.
Okay.
In Patagonia, I was photographing Fitzroy. So basically, the trek is about 1 or 2 days to reach the campsite, and then you hike up a specific viewpoint at sunrise. And I left my tripod really close to a cliff, and I was doing a big panorama. It was a bit windy, and I remember I just finished taking the last shot, and then I just kind of turned around, and then when I turned again, just my tripod with my favorite lens 1635 f2.8 were just down the cliff, and I was like, what the hell, right before my workshop. So this was just so nerve-wracking, but I was with my friend Tyler. He went down the cliff, got my camera and my lenses. My lens was completely exploded. But my camera buddy was kind of, it was really buggy, but it was kind of working. So I had my 100-400 for just the rest of the trip. 100-400 when like 95% of all this stuff that I shoot is like super wide angle. So it was, you know, it was an experience. And then I just gave my workshop without a wide lens, but you know, I still did it. So yeah, another misadventure. So never leave your camera, whatever tripod, you know, out of sights if you're not super leveled and stable. But this was just like, yeah, this was just a stupid mistake, but yeah. It happens.
No, that's, I've not had anything like that, to be honest. I've been quite lucky so far. Touch wood, I've not broken anything yet. So, but then again, I don't climb mountains, so
yeah. You haven't lost a drone yet? No.
No, I don't have one, so I've not got it to lose.
yeah. I think they say that the third of the people that buy drones end up just either losing it or breaking it. It's just really, yeah, drones are really bad.
Yeah. So you mentioned there your workshops, obviously probably not going ahead at the moment, but what do you love about them? Like, why did you sort of want to do them?
Yeah. So that goes back to, I think, 2018. So about 1.5, 2 years after starting really doing photography, I had an opportunity to teach like a class of 10 people. That was back in Quebec. And I've never done that. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'm going to try it and see if I like it. And it was just one day, a bit of hiking. And I just remember just loving it so much. And it's just a feeling that I haven't gotten a lot before. So just like, you know, teaching the angles, the composition, how to use your equipment properly, I just really enjoyed it. So right after it, the next summer, then I just started to launch a bunch of workshops, starting in the Canadian Rockies. And then after, I did Iceland, and then Patagonia, Peru, Scotland, and I just never really stopped. And I just realized that this is like the thing that I like, that I enjoy the most. And I just really like to bring people to spots and see their reactions. Like, I think that sometimes when you go to places, often, like especially here in the Canadian Rockies, you tend to forget how beautiful it is. So when you bring someone and you see their reaction, seeing the mountains in that, you know, popular spot that you have shot 10 billions of times, but just how stoked they are, I just really like this feeling of showing like new spots and helping people create and develop their creative vision and learn photography. So it's kind of like something that I didn't know I had in myself, just more like teacher side of it. But I discovered it, and then I think I'll keep doing that for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that you're willing to obviously put yourself kind of out of your comfort zone and do things that are also a challenge, because I think a lot of people maybe in your position that have like a following, like maybe don't realise that setting up a workshop with all those kind of people that do follow you would be quite like a good thing for them. Like I know myself that I'm not, like I'm still learning, so to have somebody like yourself or someone of similar experience to kind of talk you through things, I think that would help a lot. Even if it was like, how long would you normally do them for?
For how long?
Yeah.
It depends on the location. Like here in the Rockies, I can do just one day, but
Right.
up to like 2 weeks if it's booked for like in a private setting. But usually my international workshops, I would say between 6 days and 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's usually the time frame. So for example, the one that I'm doing in Peru, because we're doing a high altitude trek, we need about 2 to 3 days of to get our
Right.
body used to the altitude.
Yeah.
And then after, we have a few days of editing. So just all of this together, I think it's around 14 days. And the
Okay.
trek itself is around 8 days. So yeah, so that's something that's super cool. And I think something that you said to perhaps like kind of like get out of your comfort zone, I think that's also one of the reasons why people join my trips, because most of them, they're not like get in the car and then get out and you have the composition in front of you. Like you need to push yourself mentally and physically, especially the one in Peru and Patagonia, because you're hiking in high altitude. You're for like 10 to 12 hours a day. You're waking up at 2 a.m. almost every day. It's just very draining physically. And I think that trying to do that by yourself sometimes it's very tough. But if you're with a group of people and the motivation is there, and you know that you will reach the right viewpoint at the right moment, you kind of have this stress taken off you.
Yeah.
And I think that's super cool, because then you can really focus on the shots that you want to get. And if you have questions, then you have me, and sometimes also I have an assistant. So yeah, so I really enjoy it. I really enjoy waking up people at 2 a.m. and screaming and being like, hey everybody, let's go. Like, I love it. I think it's just like, yeah, I think it's part of the adventure to be tired and miserable.
Yeah.
And it's just like, embracing it. So yeah, not all my workshops are tired and miserable, tiring and miserable, but yeah, some of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there different like levels of photographers that go on these? Because like I think a lot of people might think if they're not an expert hiker or they're not an expert photographer, could they go on them sort of trips?
Yeah, there's definitely like recommendations. So for example, as for the level of photography, I usually recommend people to at least have a basic understanding of what is where on their camera, like when using the manual mode. I don't know all the cameras.
Yeah.
So if I have someone who comes with a specific Canon looking for the shutter speed, like, it might take a little bit of time where we could be focusing on creativity and like, other stuff that is a bit more important. So I think that just having like a basic knowledge with your manual mode is required. And as for the hiking and the trekking, like for sure the big treks one, I always recommend to be used to walk at least 10 to 15 to 20K per day. So there is like a physical preparation that is recommended. Because I think that sometimes people tend to overestimate themselves. And then, you're halfway the trek and, it's like your feet hurt and like you can't, like it's still possible if you're able to push yourself through the trek. But I think that just having like a minimum of physical preparation is fine. But at the same time, for example, for Peru, for next year, I have one guy who's I think 68 years old. So like there's no really like age limit, but as long as you're in a good shape and used to walk like long distances, then it's totally doable. Yeah, so I think it just depends on the workshop.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Your editing style, how you kind of go for the blue tones. Why was that? Like, why was that your initial like attraction to those kind of editing style?
It's a really good question. I get that a lot, and I never really know what to respond. Like for me, it's kind of like, well, why do you prefer pizza over spaghetti? It's like, okay, what's a deep question to answer this? But I do think that if I refer as my early work back in like the Canadian Rockies, I remember on that particular trip, it was very moody, dark. I don't think I got like one day of sun. So my work, my original work, started with really dark and moody and cold shots, and I just realized that I really liked this style. And every time that I would try to shoot things that were more like golden hour, sunrise or sunset, like more like colorful,
Yeah.
I would just not really get attracted to this, and I would just constantly go back to my dark and moody, you know, shots. So I do think that I kept that over the years, and like even let's say if I shoot something midday or something that has a lot of orange and greens, like when I edit, I always tend to cool everything down and make it very cold and dark and moody. Um, but also I think that the color blue has like different signification. So
Yeah.
blue is usually associated to freedom, to calm, to you know, like also like meditation, and it's just like it's just a very calming color.
Yep.
In general. And I think that that's what I look for my work. So like I create little um little like landscapes and places where I can go escape. So I want to look at my work and feel these feelings.
Yep.
Rather than you know, looking at work that is super bright and colorful, that is maybe a bit overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like, you know, a mix of like personal preferences and how that specific color makes me feel. And like I love to look at my work and scroll down my feed, and it's almost like soothing. I'm like, oh, this spot. And then, you know, I just tend to connect more with my images that are very cold.
Yeah.
And also that have a bit of fantasy. So my composites.
Yeah.
I connect more with my composites than my work that is a bit more natural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there your I say composite, which is probably wrong.
No, it's composite. I see me. I don't pronounce it
No. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll go with composite because that's all I can say.
Okay. I say composite, but it's it's kind of like that's fine. It's French.
So those kind of images. Yeah. When I started out, my background is a graphic designer. So when I was, say, creating graphics, I would be taking different maybe skies from different images and foregrounds and that and putting them together. And I would class that as like digital editing type thing.
Yeah.
And then with my photography, I've kind of stayed away from that because I think that I'm maybe editing it too much, if you know what I mean. I don't have an issue with like little bits of editing here and there, but it's almost because of my background, I know that that's not the original photograph.
Yeah.
So one thing that I like about your Instagram and the way that you obviously present your work is that you say you are a composite artist. So a lot of people don't do that, but you can tell that they are doing that. So do you think that's important to kind of put that across because it isn't real? Like, although it is, but you know what I mean? Yeah,
100%. I get where you're coming from. I think that when I started creating composites, I was not even aware that they were composites. For me, it was almost just like natural to take different elements and put everything together. But, you know, over the time, I started to receive messages and DMs about, oh, this is fake, this is na. And that made me think, and I think that it's really up to everyone to present their work how they want. However, personally, I think that it's way more fun to be fully transparent with your work and just present exactly what it is.
Yeah.
First, it eliminates all perhaps like negative comments or whatever that you could receive. But second, it also educates people about, you know, the difference between pure photography and digital art, and even places where it's kind of like a merge of both. So I think that usually I recommend people to write, this is a composite,
Yeah.
without having to, start with that, like art, photography, whatever, it's meant to make us dream and make us connect with either our inner selves or with the landscape, whatever. So I think that if you start by just being like, this is a composite, it kind of like, you know what I mean? It kind of kills it kills the mystery, it kills the vibe.
Yeah.
You still need a bit of mystery. So what I like to do is, tell the story, then give the technical details and finish with that it's a composite.
Yeah.
So this way, people that are truly interested in knowing the technical side behind an image, they can stop after the story, whatever. People who are only interested in knowing the story, they stop after the story.
Yeah.
People interested in getting the full details, they read everything. Oh, it's a composite. And then they have learned something. Maybe they have learned that I have photographed the sky separately from the foreground, whatever, 2 different places. But yeah, I do think that presentation is important, but we don't really have any control over that. And I do see a lot of photographers who do a lot of composite who purposely choose not to share it. And I think that's okay too. But personally, I have found a lot of success sharing it. And I have found way more positivity in sharing it than not sharing it.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of like my mindset. And now it's actually pretty rare that I post an image without stating any technical details around it, because I feel that everyone can learn from it. So why not, Yeah. So that's kind of my mindset towards this.
Yeah. No, I just think that whenever I see your photographs, I tend to be drawn to them, whether they're being digitally edited or not. Like, I think I sometimes see a lot of the same thing, like on Instagram, Twitter, things like that. So it's nice to see that, whether it is the photograph on itself or whether it is digitally kind of edited. And I think I struggle to like go towards that, to kind of towards what you're doing, just because of my background. And I think I should just maybe, like, what does it matter? Like, I should maybe go for it. And because the stuff that you do is amazing, and obviously I'd probably never be able to get to that point, but to even just try to combine my graphic design skills with my photography.
Exactly. I think that sometimes people that have zero background in graphic design, it's very tough for them to start because they just have no knowledge. But for someone like you who has a background and who is able to create composites, that would definitely be interesting to see what you create. But at the end of the day, it just depends what you connect with. Like for me, I know that all my single shots, for some reason, I don't connect as much, because I'm like, well, the person next to me could have had created the same thing. You know what I mean? But my composites, it's like, well, I'm combining half what the landscape has to offer me and then half of my imagination to create something that is like truly unique. So so that's why I view this as like almost like an elevated way to expand your creativity with landscape photography. But there's some people who really think that just like staying as natural as possible is what they need to do, and that's how they connect with their work, and that's totally fine too. It's just like different ways to connect with art, and that's totally fine. But I would definitely be interested to see what you create.
I'll need to try it. I'll need to get past that barrier of like actually like going to do it. But I take it, when you first started, how, like, are you totally self-taught with both, obviously mostly photography, but did you know anything about Photoshop or Lightroom, or what is it that you use?
It actually took me, I'm 100% self-taught, and it took me a long time to even get the basics of Photoshop. Probably like 3 years. Just because I was able to create enough with just using Lightroom. But then when I started to really push my composite work, I needed to expand my knowledge in Photoshop, but like my knowledge in Photoshop, is still very limited. I only use maybe 5, 6, 7 tools or techniques just to achieve what I need to achieve. Like I'm not big on knowing all the shortcuts, possibilities. Like I usually just really focus on what I need to create my work, and then the rest is just like bonus. But yeah, so I think it's just like a mix of Lightroom and Photoshop. Definitely more Photoshop these days, but as I said, it's just very, very simple techniques that are practically almost the same for every composite. I have taken a few tutorials, very few, maybe one from Max Rive, one from Ryan Dyer, learned a few tricks here and there, but all the rest really comes from experimenting and just trying a bunch of stuff, and then just kind of like developing my own way and my own style, my own processing, which is maybe not the most like the quicker. I take a long time to edit, but that's my way to create the best possible images.
How long do you take, would you say, rough, like on average?
My problem is that I like to leave the images simmer and sit for like days or weeks or even sometimes months and even for years. So sometimes I will start an edit and then leave it for 1 month and then come back and then leave it for 1 week and then come back. So I think accumulated sometimes maybe 10 to 20 hours.
Right.
But I've had images up to 40 hours, like easily, because sometimes I will hit roadblocks where I just don't like the composition, don't like the edit, and I would just start over just to kind of like have a fresh start and not redo the same mistakes. So I will even delete the file. I don't even want to see the file. I don't want to see what I did before, so my brain can forget about it and then start over. So definitely starting over, you're just, doubling, tripling the amount of time that you're editing. So yeah, it's a bit crazy. So usually, let's say if I would take a photo today, it would probably take me 6 months to put it on my Instagram. Just, assemble everything, leave the time to sit and come back to the edit. So yeah, it takes a long time.
So when you go out, obviously, to photograph, what do you have in your mind? Because you're obviously layering up different things. Are you going out just to get the composition, and then do you have an idea of what the sky is going to be like in another day you go out, or how does it work?
So usually my process starts with a scouting trip to the location that I want to photograph during the day. So I go during the day. I don't even bring my camera. I'm just going there to look at the elements, just take a few photos with my phone and get an idea. Also, sometimes I'll just like check if there's possibility to capture the Milky Way or whatever, the moon, whatever, at that same spot separately for my composite. But I start looking at the different elements, and then I come back home and I take my time to kind of like process. Okay, there was a bunch of flowers there, but there was that really cool rock there. Maybe I could do a cave there. Maybe I could. So I start thinking about already what I could create there. And then I come back a second time, night, blue hour, and then stay for sunrise. And then I capture all the elements that I could be using for the composite. So back in the days, I used to mix like, different skies from different places. But I think that what I have been really enjoying lately is just to capture all the same composite elements from the same spot. So I try to do that as much as I can, but sometimes it's just not possible. So then once I have all the elements, I come back to my computer and then I just try a bunch of stuff with like really bad masking. I will just throw a bunch of flower with the mountain and maybe a moon with like the worst masking, but just to see if it's like possible or visually interesting, and if what I have in my mind is actually doable. So I will try to assemble like the different pieces of the puzzle, and then once I am set with a specific composition, then I will just start over, do proper masking,
Mhm.
assemble everything, and then little by little I will do the color grading. So
Okay.
using camera raw filters, or like a bunch of different techniques, maybe add a bit of atmosphere. But this process usually takes like a few months, because it's like little by little by little, close the computer, come back, oh, it's too blue, change it, add a bit more atmosphere, ask a friend,
Yeah.
about his opinion. So it's a really long process until it feels right. Yeah, so that's usually like the way that I create my composites. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of pre-visualization, and then like a lot of building different like kind of possible compositions in Photoshop.
Yeah. I think you're probably the perfect example of kind of like hard work kind of gets you places, because from what you've just described there, like a lot of people would just think you've like been for like say an hour trek and that's what you've captured. And I think
Yeah.
people don't understand really what goes into a lot of your
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And I just, I'm maybe my own worst enemy, because I'll go out, and because I don't obviously layer things up, I'll just take what's in front of me, but then I'll
Mm-hmm.
come back
Yeah.
and maximum I'll spend an hour on like editing, and that's it.
Okay.
So, but then you see my results compared to you, compared to your results. It's kind of, you maybe see why kind of thing, and I think a lot of people are maybe that obsessed. I'm not anymore, but I was at the beginning of putting
Yeah.
something out every day and just trying to put something out. So your photographs, how often would you say you actually put things out, or whether it's on your website or social media?
I think my average is 10 photos a year. If you
Jesus.
check on my Instagram, I post less than once per month. It's very, I pick the best of the best, and then I spend a ridiculous amount of hours on
Yeah.
them. So of course you don't see all the bad photos that I
Yeah.
have taken. And I think that for me, like I've never really been pressured to put something out, because I've never been focused on growing my page. Like
Yeah.
I do have a decent following, but for
Yeah.
someone who's been doing it for 5 years, it's big, but it could have been way bigger
Okay.
if I would have been focused on quantity. But I think that really focusing on the quality and like releasing less than one photo a month, this is what helped me to really have a more distinguished style that is very, very like cohesive, and have images that I'm really proud of, and that perfectly reflect the vision that I have for my work. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that, yeah, I think even last year was like 8, maybe the year before was 12. So yeah, I think my average is around 10,
Yeah.
I would say. I think
Uh,
maybe they're even less.
yeah. I think I'm gonna have to start using that technique. I think because you just, I think sometimes, like I say, in the beginning, I was too obsessed, putting stuff out all the time. Just, I ended up, I didn't not like it, but you kind of begrudge going out all the time, and it's just,
Yeah.
it becomes a chore. And yeah, I just had a break for a few months, and then now I go out maybe, I don't know, once every couple of weeks or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I might try and spend more time editing, and then just put it up whenever, whether that's 10 a year like yourself or what have you. But
Yeah. I think there's nothing worse than forcing an edit or forcing
yeah,
yourself to go out, and if you don't feel it, you don't feel it. Like
yeah,
last winter, I think I've been out shooting maybe twice or 3 times in 5 months,
right,
and that was okay, because every time that I force myself to go take photos, even if I don't feel like it or not inspired, I just come back home with stuff that I don't even want to edit.
mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, I think that, just maybe focusing on how you feel about going out and shoot, and how you feel about your work, and just pushing yourself
Yeah.
you know, I think pushing yourself is a good thing if you want to grow an audience rapidly. But honestly, like, I just, even like today, I see way more advantages of having, let's say, a lower following, but really high quality work than a high following and a bunch of work that I would not be super proud of. So yeah, I think it's just about kind of like these both perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just finding the right balance for yourself, and everyone's obviously different. But that's one thing that I've realised is just don't put any unnecessary sort of pressure on yourself. But we'll
100%.
see. I'm going to take some of your advice on board, anyways.
Yeah.
So one of the images that I actually wanted to talk about is the one that's in the middle behind you.
Oh, this one.
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't know enough about NFTs. I'm not going to ask you to explain them because at the end of the day, do your own research, whatever.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
so, but why did you obviously start sort of looking at NFTs? And no doubt from the sale of that NFT, you're extremely happy that you did. So yeah, why was sort of your reason for going into that kind of market?
yeah. So I think I'm always very interested about trends and like spot trends before they really go full
Yeah,
on. And NFTs were definitely one of this type of situation back in January.
yeah,
So back in January, I just moved to the Canadian Rockies and I did not really have any projects, workshops, not a lot of work. I was just working on my 21 Shades of Blue course, but that was about it. And I just stumbled upon NFTs, like I think on social media, whatever, TikTok, and I just started reading about it. And I just thought that the concept of ownership was so interesting and so interesting that, you know, this actually had any sort of value. So I just started to spend a lot of time on places like Clubhouse where they would talk a lot about
yeah.
NFTs. I learned a lot. I was spending 8 to 10 hours a day on Clubhouse, just
Right.
listening to different talks, learning how to talk about my work, talk about myself, which was not really something I have done before.
Yeah.
And it was just so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly I started to form an idea of how I would like to do my first NFT drop. So I kind of like applied on a bunch of different platforms, and I had a really specific idea for my first drop. So because I do a lot of workshops and because I love to bring people on adventures, I really wanted to offer one specific NFT part of my NFT drops that would include a trip with me to the Canadian Rockies.
Okay.
So I pitched that idea to Super Rare, which is one of the most premium platforms, and that really caught their attention. Super Rare, they receive about 10,000 applications, 1,000 applications every day.
Right.
So, you know, it was like, how can I stand out?
Yeah.
So I think that this idea really stand out. And then within 2 days, I was on the platform. So I just really, really took my time. I don't know if you saw the promo video that I did so then I worked on that promo video for 150 hours with my friend. I just put all my heart and soul into this because I really believed in NFTs, because I had spent 3 to 4 months just listening and learning. And I truly thought that there was a huge potential in there, way more than a bunch of other stuff that I could have done. So I just decided to go for it and take a risk. And then I basically dropped a few images. I have to say that my first image sold almost instantly, but then I stayed without sales for about 6 weeks.
Right.
So that was really hard because I just have put so much time and energy in this. But I realized that NFTs are very unpredictable. And it's not because you do all the work that you need to do a promo video. I did a website explaining the entire drop. I did about 5 interviews, including one with Sony, one with the platform. It was insane. I just did everything that I could. And I realized that even if you do all of this, it's not guaranteed that you're going to sell, because it's too difficult to understand. But about 6 weeks later, I just jumped on a space on Twitter. They have Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
Told a bit about my story. There were a few new collectors in there, and then I got 2 sales that night, and then it kind of like snowballed, and then I sold all the rest of my images within 2 weeks. So it's been like a huge success, but it was a lot of ups and downs and moments of, you know, doubts that was it worth it? Was it not worth it? And then that particular image, the Spirit Island image, is the one that is attached to a trip. Okay. So basically with that image, they get the NFT image, they get a 5-day trip, all expense paid with me. They also get a commission piece. So basically on the trip, I will create a new image that will be created for the collector. So 2 images, 1 trip. I also gave full license, perpetual, unlimited on that new piece. So it was like a really huge package that I just wanted to throw and see if anyone would want it. And and then I sold it, and it was just amazing. And I think this is probably something that I will try to recreate in the future. But, you know, it's kind of like, it's a really crazy universe. Like NFTs, very difficult to understand, very niche, lots of layers. You almost have to be on Twitter every day, because 1 week in the NFT space is like 1 year in the normal world. It's just absolutely crazy. Trends, they switch really quickly, but I think that's why it's so fascinating, because if you really understand it, you can really be successful. So it's been great. It's definitely been amazing for me, so I'm really happy about that.
Nah, congratulations. Obviously, it's I would say majority of the time these kind of things, they don't happen to everyone, but because of the amount of work that you've put in, and like you say, even the promo that you done, it was kind of, I wouldn't say it was inevitable that something like that would happen, because like you say, nothing's guaranteed, but it's just nice to see somebody get the rewards for kind of the hard work that they put in. Obviously congratulations. And just going back to that photograph, how did you actually, because I don't know, but when I look at that, it doesn't look as layered as your other photographs.
It's a single shot.
Is it?
It's a single shot, yeah. Yeah, so that's like probably one of my only single shots that I have in my portfolio. So I took this back in 2017 on the trip there. That was, I think, at sunrise. I was with my friend, and I was like, hey, just go canoe there. And I was just shooting with my, I think back in the days, like my A6000 small lens, and I just had perfect conditions. So it's a single shot, but I have to say that the mountains are compressed. So that's why they look very jagged, but mountains are compressed. But I was just like really fortunate to have these crazy conditions, perfect reflection. But you're not the first one who was asking me that. I had Travel Alberta who wanted to use this photo, and they were asking me if this was like a Photoshop reflection. I was like, no, I will send you the raw file. You will see, like, this is just like mountains are compressed. Yes. But you know, it's just like, I was just really lucky. So extremely lucky conditions. And this is probably this with my Hawaii road photo. These are my top 2 most viral photos. 2 single shots as well. So, you know, it's interesting to know that when most of my stuff is composite. I think it also proves that, you know, if you have like a really, really good single shot, then, you know, it has as much potential to go viral than images that are very heavily like digitally manipulated. So
exactly.
So favorite.
I did think that, to be honest, because I couldn't see much like to it, if you know what I mean. Like the other ones, you can obviously tell that there's more to them, whereas that you could probably like see that being as you shot it type thing. So perfect conditions.
Perfect conditions, yes.
I won't keep you for too much longer. Obviously, I appreciate the amount of time that you've given me so far. Just a few more sort of questions. So when you eventually, which might never happen, finish photography and you're retired, living in the mountains somewhere, what do you want to be remembered for? Like your photography, what sort of meaning, or if somebody sees it for the first time, what do you want them to get from it?
Yeah. I think the one thing that makes me the most happy is when I get DMs or messages from people that tell me that one of my photographs inspired them to go on a solo sunrise hike.
Right.
This is just the best thing for me, because then my photographs are inspiring people to push their limits of their comfort zone and actually go out and explore and create. So I would love for my work to be remembered like perhaps something that is inspiring adventure, but also something that is inspiring to be unique and not to be afraid to be unique and to follow your creative vision. Because I have to say, I didn't have it super easy. When I started with Composites, I had a lot of criticism, and I just decided to stick to my vision and keep going, and doing that just really helped me to be successful today. So yeah, I think that both these aspects, I would love for my work to be remembered like that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So my final question that I ask everybody, and I'm quite interested to hear your answer, is if you could take one last photograph, what would it be?
One last photograph.
And it can be layered. It doesn't, like your style.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be something related to pushing my physical limits.
Okay.
And I say I would love to go at the top of Everest and just that would be the last photo. I think even if it's even if it's a bad shot, I would not care. I think just either Everest or K2. Like if I can, like once in my life, reach one of these two summits and be able to take a photograph from up there, I think my life would be complete. But also I think that's a really good question, because it also shows what is the most important part of your work. And that right now makes me realize that perhaps one of the most important part of my work is really to push myself physically, even more than the creative side of it. Creative maybe comes after. So so let's say Everest.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. No one's said that so far, so I'm sure I've had a few different answers, but that's it's one that I think I don't think I would ever climb Everest. I'm not that kind of, I don't mind climbing, things like that, but in terms of something like that, it's never on my list. But I think everyone has different goals, and I think if you keep going the way that you're going, I have no doubt that you will achieve that. Is it something that you've actually thought about booking, like to go and do it?
Yeah, I've been to Nepal twice, and every single time it's just a country, the mountains there. There's just something over there that is amazing and compelling. But yeah, I love really intense physical challenges. So I think that this would be the perfect, challenge, the highest mountain in the world. Why not? You know?
Exactly. Exactly. You might as well set your sort of sights on the top. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully the camera works.
Well, I'd imagine there's people who have taken photos from the top.
I think so. I wonder with the altitude how the camera would react though.
Yeah.
Not sure.
I guess we'll find out. Exactly. So thanks very much for coming on and having a chat. And
well, that's my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. That was a really fun chat.